We're also lucky to have Dana Stringham today, Autumn's husband. He's going to tell us a bit from his perspective what it was like as the spouse of someone suffering with bipolar. So Dana, tell me about when you first met Autumn, what it was like, what you noticed about her, your story of how you guys met.
Oh, this is the best part of the story, because I love talking about the first time I met her. I actually met her at her boyfriend's house, which was kind of a cool story. It's true, actually, yeah. And I was with another friend of mine, and I remember when we walked in the stairs, she was standing at the top of the stairs when we walked in, and all I saw was just this big, bright smile full of teeth, and these big, beautiful eyes, and I immediately was like, oh man, I'm in the right place, because I didn't want to go to the party, first of all. My mom kind of forced me, and so when I saw her, it was amazing. I really kind of felt the connection just by looking at her. It was really neat. And then, of course, throughout the course of the night, we got to know each other a little bit better, and she tried to hold my hand and this kind of a thing. So it was really neat, and we really had a good time.
Tell me about the dating relationship to then when you got married. What was your experience like? What was she like? What was your relationship like?
You know, it's interesting because when we talk about it now, and Autumn and I talk about that first time we met, she was obviously on a high side, if you will. And for anybody that's familiar with bipolar disorder, that's a really nice place to be for a lot of people, right? And it was a really nice place for us to be as we were dating. I mean, we had a lot of fun. We talked about a lot of stuff. We went out and did a lot of things, and we just had a great time when she was really feeling good. And it was wonderful. I realized then just how bright she was, how smart she was, very articulate, and just right down to things. And it was really an enjoyable time. And we actually had quite a short courtship too. So during the time that we actually dated, I mean, I look back now and I did notice that there were times where we would go back and forth between, I guess, mood swings, for lack of a better word, and the times when she was down, it was really down. But I didn't recognize it as being necessarily bipolar or anything else because I wasn't familiar with that. I wasn't familiar with what bipolar was, what mental illness was in general. I just kind of was a young guy, wasn't familiar with girls even, let alone anything else, right? And so I didn't see it as anything necessarily odd in that case during our courtship. I just thought it was maybe that's the way things are, as we kind of went through dating.
When did you start noticing that she was becoming more ill and that she really needed to get help?
Yeah, I guess there were times before we even got pregnant with our first child that it just, I was working long hours and she was working too, and there was a point there where she wasn't working, and I would come home after a 12-hour shift I was working at the time, and I learned only later that she had gotten up out of bed just like 15 minutes before I got home, but had literally just kind of been in bed all day long, house is a big mess and whatever else, and so yeah, I mean, I looked at that and I kind of thought, well, that's weird. Maybe she doesn't like me. Maybe she doesn't want to make dinner or something. I didn't get it. And I'm not trying to be rude or mean or anything here, but I didn't understand what was going on, because in my mind, at least anyways, as a young 21-year-old kid, I had this picture of how our family was going to be and how our life would be and stuff like that. And so, I mean, we did the best that we could. I think after the birth of our son was when it was when she had a particular, I guess it's a psychotic episode, and this is actually, she tells the story in her book a lot better than I can tell it, but I was going to school at the time, and we lived in an apartment, and every morning I would leave, and she would still be in bed, of course, right, and she was trying to nurse our young son, and that whole thing, it was really difficult for her, and I would leave, and I would lock the door as I left, and then one time I came back because I had forgotten some of my books, and I unlocked the door and there was a click with the lock, and she met me in the hallway with fists flying and screaming and yelling and telling me to get out, that I was there to kill her, that I'd let the killers in and this kind of thing. And so, I mean, obviously at that point there's no more hiding. There's no more hiding it, and I for lack of a better word, slapped me in the face and realized I've got to get this poor woman some help. And I realized once again just how, to that point, how unsupportive and impatient I really had been as a young father and a young husband, not recognizing how bad things were getting for her. And so it was at that point when I was like, okay, we got to get some help. And of course, immediately go to the hospital, and she gets on all sorts of medications. And that was really sort of the beginning of the end, if you will, kind of a steady downward cycle of medications and doctors and hospital visits and nonstop for the next 4 years or more, I think it was. But yeah, I guess that was really sort of the low point.
So as Autumn writes in the book, she came home from the hospital at one point and had to be watched 24 hours a day. And you were gone for work, I think. And her father came and took care of her, and he gave her a different treatment. What was it like when you came back and saw her after that period of time?
You know, it was actually, it was lucky, not lucky, but I guess it was meant to be the way it happened, because as I mentioned before, I'd been working a midnight shift. And when she got out of the hospital for the last time, the doctors had told us that she was not allowed to be alone. She had to have 24-hour supervision, and you know, our young son had to be monitored and all that kind of stuff. And so I was working a shift at a time, and normally when I was at my work, she would stay at my mother's place, you know, for example, to be watched over during the night. But for whatever reason, my mother couldn't take her that week, and she ended up, her dad volunteered. And of course, I didn't know, well, we kind of knew that he had started this experiment with pig stuff with Joseph, her younger brother. And we were just kind of like, whatever, that's weird, but we're not, you know, so I honestly didn't know that he was going to try to give this stuff to her. And I think back now, and it's probably a good thing that it happened that way, because I think I would have been too thick-headed and I would have said, no, don't, you know, you're not going to do this. The doctor said, don't rock the boat, and that kind of thing. But so anyway, she did. She ended up going down about a 5-hour drive south to where her father lived, and ended up getting on this stuff. And I remember her calling me a few days later and telling me that she was feeling better, that this hole that she'd been experiencing for months and months to this point was closed up, and that she was feeling better. And I wasn't, at that point, the least bit convinced that things were really getting better, because it had just been a very short period of time that she'd gotten out of the hospital and was on all these different medications. And so, you know, I guess I just kind of thought that it was just another cycle, if you will, and that things were just going to kind of return back to normal. So I didn't really think about it too much. But as time went on, as she returned home, I noticed signs almost immediately. You know, I really noticed the light in her eyes starting to return. And that light had sort of dimmed over the previous 5 years. It had just, she'd become a sort of a shell of a person that I used to know, the one that I fell in love with at the top of the stairs, you know, kind of thing, right? And so when I saw that light starting to return and sort of fill with life again almost, I kind of felt excited. But I was hesitant all at the same time, right? It was like, wow, maybe this is going to be too good to be true. I'm not sure how this is going to play out. But over the course of the next few weeks and months, and then eventually turning into years, it just got better and better and better. And of course, we did a lot of things wrong. You know, initially we dropped this medication, don't do that medication. We realize now that, you know, there's terrible side effects and withdrawal effects from these medications and things like that we weren't aware of at the time. We weren't aware that she was pretty addicted to some of the medications that she was on, and of course caused severe withdrawal that she went through. But anyway, over the course of those next few months, and when she was done her final medication, we just saw things get better and better and better. And you know, here she sits today, 17 years later, and it's hard for me to even remember what it was like back then now, because we've had, you know, 17 years of good, 17 years of great stuff. It's hard to remember those first 5 years or whatever it was, because times are so much better now, and it's hard to believe that she was ever sick. I mean, when you look at her, it's hard to imagine, right, the things she went through, and that's the blessing of the whole thing now today, is we can sit here, and really the blessing is not just that it's her anymore either. That's the most exciting thing. We've both been able to witness over the years, and myself especially, as I got involved in this whole thing, people's lives turn around completely and go back to their families and go back to work, and that's really, really exciting and really rewarding. It makes everything, the tiny little time that we went through and the little bit of struggle that we actually went through, makes it all worth it. No question about it.
Well, thank you, Dana, so much for being here today and for sharing your story. It was great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.